Welcome back to Left of the Dial. We are exploring 100 groups from the 80s that was alternative music. Many were part of the college music scene that was really big during the 80s. Others maybe not so much, but definitely alternative. All of them kind of left of the dial. Some kind of found the dial eventually. So we're going to start at number 50 this week. I got 6 needle drops, which is really incredible to be able to do that many. So let's get going right away. And we're going to be talking about number 50 is going to be Midnight Oil. That was their first album they put out, but that one came out in the 70s. And then there's Blue Sky Mining. This one came out. Then I have stuff on cassette and CD. But Midnight Oil, they actually began in 1972, and they went on to the last 2002 out of Sydney, Australia. When they started, they called themselves The Farm. Then Peter Garrett, the lead singer, joined the group, and they became the Oils and eventually Midnight Oils. In Australia, though, they were known lovingly as the Oils. So this group, they played alt rock, hard rock, you could say, and they were extremely political. They had this hard rock sound, but also intense live performances, and they were extremely vocal about anti-nuclear, environmental issues, and indigenous causes. During their time, they released 11 albums, and this was probably their biggest one. So this came out in '87, and it's Diesel and Dust. With it, they had actually 2 hits. The Dead Heart and Beds Are Burning, that both really talked about and illuminated the plight of the indigenous Australians. This peaked at number 1 in Australia and actually made it to number 21 in the US. There are no songs on this entire album about how tough it is, how bad life on the road is to being a rock star. No way, man. This thing, it's like hard rock moxie and has melodic savvy to it. Beds Are Burning, which is playing in the background, which is probably their biggest hit. I mean, it was filled with a sing-along chorus and just blaring horns. It was so exciting. What a great way to start the album. Their songs, and this one included, I mean, they kind of have, they're sprinkled with an REM type jangle to them, but they're delivered with this punk intensity and fire. They added pop sensibilities to this album, and really it helped because it blended nicely with their lead singer Garrett's nasal, sneering voice. This album, what it did is it told the larger world, it told the audience that, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on, and really it brought their hard rock sound out to the masses. There weren't many political groups, including like the Clash, that made such a worldwide splash. These guys did. Not about love songs, but about everything that was going wrong in the world, and they let their thoughts be known. So that's number 50, Midnight Oil. Number 49, it's Jane's Addiction. This group, it's an LA band. It was formed in '85, broke up in '91, but they've reformed since then and did little things like concert tours and stuff. These guys, they played alt rock, they were alt metal, funk metal, and they also tossed in some psychedelic, just for the heck of it. They were formed from the remains of frontman Perry Farrell's previous group, which was called, I believe, Psycom. Jane's Addiction, it was actually named after Farrell's housemate, Jane Bainter, which was his muse. And during that time, they released 4 studio albums. And I have The Ritual Habitual and this one, and everything else is on CD. Nothing Shocking. This was their major label debut in 1988. In this, they mixed hard rock, prog rock, and metal. They put it all together. There's tracks like Up the Beach, Ocean Size, Mountain Song, and they're just, I mean, it's just filled with pure power and energy, but it also shows their love to two of their biggest influences, which was Led Zeppelin and The Cure. There's the song Ted Just Admit It, and it's about the serial killer Ted Bundy, and they do kind of just almost like a jazzy take on it. And then there's Summertime Rolls, and it's just filled with this epic use of changing moods and dynamics. You can just hear it in that song. There's hard rockers such as Had a Dad and Pigs in Zen that just come out and they blast at you. And there's the horn-driven Idiot's Rule, which I'm going to play you a snippet from. And it ends with a very jazzy instrumental. Thank you, boys. This was a tour de force of an album. And for me, it's one of my all-time favorite albums that ever came out. What an amazing group. But, you know, I just kind of burned out. But Jane's Addiction coming in at number 49. Name of the album, Nothing Shocking. Number 48, it's Roky Erickson. And this is Roky Erickson and the Aliens. You want to talk about a guy that's left of the dial? This dude's, he is way left of the dial. So Roky, he's from Dallas, and he was one of the principal pioneers of the psychedelic music genre. He was born in '47 and passed away in last year, as a matter of fact. This was the man that formed the 13th Floor Elevators. He's also the man that his use of drugs and his tragic stays in prisons and mental hospitals is just one of those tragic rock and roll stories. In fact, in the 80s, he developed this. It was years. I mean, this was an obsession that lasted years, but it was over mail, and he would spend hours and hours poring over random junk mail and writing to the solicitors, and also living in dead celebrities. He was finally arrested in 1989 on charges of mail theft because he had been stealing his neighbor's mail. And when they went to his house, the mail was taped all over the walls of his house. I mean, this guy was out there. But boy, you talk about making some music. So this came out in 1981, and it's actually a nice original pressing. And it was with this group, the Aliens. And it put out this classic album, The Evil One. Stu Cook from Creedence Clearwater Revival produced the album, which was pretty neat. I mean, it is just, it's like with feral lips twisted, this fury. There's this snarling lyrics about demons and zombies and vampires and ghosts, and then more demons again. And I mean, and it's played with scary intensity. It's just amazing. The album, it just brims with these propulsive bangers and just scary visions. I mean, Roky had, I mean, he was chased by demons. He had the demons, and they were in him. Every song on this album just slams with propulsive rage, and it really showed how strong a rocker Erickson really was, and just how good his band could be, because they were tight and they were sharp. It also, again, it gives you a glimpse of the demons that were in this man's mind. The material, it's dark. It's really dark, but the music just has this punk intensity to it, and somewhat like Blue Oyster Cult. What a classic album, what an important album. Roky Erickson, The Evil One from '81. Number 47 is the Bevis Frond. And I have this one here, and this is Marshlands, but also from the 80s. Triptych, he did this. From the 80s, we have Any Gas Faster, and of course, the ever popular and famous Aunt Winnie's Asylum. What's it called here? Aunt Winnie's album. But the one I'm going to talk about is going to be Marshland. So the Bevis Frond was formed in '86 by Nick Selman, and basically it's kind of a one-man group. He's out of England and still performing today. In the '60s, Selman, he had a group called Bevis Frond Museum, which then changed to Odd Socks and eventually to the Von Trapp family. Then he had this motorcycle accident and left him restricted in his place, so he bought this 4-track tape recorder and began making music that he liked, but dealt with like the Hendrix, the Wipers, and the Byrds, but with a real British feel to it. The music is very neo-psychedelia and is basically, again, like a one-man show. And since '86, he's made 27 albums. Wow. So in Inner Marshland, this was his second album, and it came out in '87. And it's filled with these fuzzy and distorted guitars. There's songs like Slave that are hard rocking, while other songs like Run at the Sun and Paris and Query, I'm sure I'm saying that one wrong, but they really have this trippy, droning sound to them. Solid Vomito is just a rollicking organ instrumental. I mean, this album is filled with sounds of bubbles and birds, and there's submerged chants and TV samples. I mean, everything's tossed into this thing. I personally, sometimes it does get just a little too trippy, especially when you get into poetry reading. But you know what? It's for those of you, if you like your psychedelic music, you're just not going to go wrong with the Bevis Frond. You got 27 albums to choose from. So number 47, the Bevis Frond. Number 46, Peter Gabriel. Peter Gabriel, this man spent a lot of time left of the dial. First when he was with Genesis, and then when he went solo in 1975. Really, it wasn't until '86 that he found mainstream success with the album Soul. But after leaving Genesis, he put out 4 albums, all titled Peter Gabriel. This guy has a real sense of humor, don't you think? His first couple albums, he worked with Robert Fripp. But then on his third album, he began to delve into African music and drum machines. And on that one, he even had Phil Collins play a track. And that's what we're going to talk about here. This is his album that came out in 1980. Again, his third one. And it's titled Melt. Get it? This album actually went to #1 on the charts, I believe, in the UK. It spawned the hits Games Without Frontiers, which is an anti-war song, and Biko, an anti-apartheid song, which is one of my favorites. Atlantic Records refused to put it out. They said, they looked at him and says, no, we want it to sound more like the Doobie Brothers. Peter Gabriel and the Doobies. Well, shall we say, he decided to go and play for Mercury Records instead. And while he was recording, he actually banned the use of cymbals because he wanted to give this music a more tribal sound. The ballads, what is it? I don't remember, and the Family Snapshot were about social violence and urban fear. The opening song, Intruder, it has this controlled menace to it. And it just gives it this scary sound, and I probably should have played that. The music on the album, it's bleak, it's chilly, it's dreary, but it's also an arty masterpiece that the public absolutely ate up. Peter Gabriel, his album Melt, number 46. Number 45, The Blasters. This group was formed in 1979 in Downey, California, and their music was self-described as American music that was a combination of rockabilly, early rock and roll, and punk rock. And they did a great job at doing that. Brothers Phil and Dave Elvin started the band. And when they were young, these guys, they used to sneak into clubs, and they would go in and they would watch Big Joe Turner and T-Bone Walker play. And their name, the Blasters, actually came from Joe Turner's backing band, which was called the Blues Blasters. These guys, they became fixtures of the LA punk scene, and they put out 4 studio albums before breaking up in '85. They did reform in '86 and went on till last year. So this is the Blasters' second album, the one that most people see. It was done in 1981. On this album, they added piano and baritone sax to give it kind of a strong rockabilly sound, and it really works well. The band is, I'm telling you, this band is tighter than a drum. And the songs are just filled with this joyous, irresistible momentum. It's just such a fun album to listen to. It's filled with their classic, playing in the background right now, Marie Marie. But there's also American music and Border Radio. All of them, standards from the Blasters. The album, it sounds like something that came from Sun Studio in the 50s. And if you are unable to tell, these guys, you can't even tell covers from the originals. You can't. They do such a good job. The piano, it has just this honky-tonk feel, and the sax absolutely growls and blows throughout the whole album. All I can tell you is, welcome to the birth of rock and roll blaster style. And also on this album, you do get bonus yodeling. Number 45, The Blasters. Number 44, my left of the dial pick, is King's X. So King's X was formed in 1979 in Springfield, Missouri, and they're still playing. This was a progressive metal, funk, soul band, and it was influenced by gospel, by blues, and British invasion groups. It was really a pivotal band in the terms of the development of progressive metal. After moving around and having struggles, because they started in '79, they finally released their debut album in 1988. Then came their landmark album in 1989, and that's this one, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska. Came out again in '89. And this is a concept album, and it's based upon a short story that was written by their drummer, Gary Gaskill. And it's just filled with lyrical themes. The melodies are very tight. Again, they were influenced by the British invasion. These guys, they like to harmonize. But there's also these grooves that incorporate gospel and psychedelia. The song Over My Head, it has just this soulful metal groove to it. And again, close harmonies. While there's a song like Summerland, that's a power ballad, and that was really promoted heavily on MTV. There's a blend of Rush to the heavy progressive rock, and the Beatles' natural melodic instincts are felt in this album. And again, the harmonies, heavenly. It'll Never Be the Same is another song, and it's filled with these staccato riffs and rousing choruses. This album, when it came out, it received high critical praise. I remember it reading about it in Rolling Stone, and they just went on about this album. I had no idea about King's X, but I went out and bought this. Also because Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, and anything with Nebraska, well, I'm going to buy that. This only made it to number 123 on the charts, but it's a classic. Number 44, King's X, and the album Gretchen Goes to Nebraska. Number 43, The Gun Club. This is an American post-punk blues band formed in '79 and went on to '96, coming out of LA. The band, they took punk rock and they merged it more with traditional rockabilly and country music, and they were really part of the first wave of cowpunk bands. During their lifetime, they released 7 albums. I was introduced to this band by Vinyl Richie. He showed this album a number of times and just kept telling me, you gotta get it, you gotta get it. Their sophomore album, which is this one here, is Miami. This came out in '81. They had just signed to Chris Stein's label called Animal. So he produced this album, and his wife at the time, girlfriend, I can't remember, Debbie Harry, actually sings backup vocals on several of the tracks. The lead singer, his name was Jeffrey Lee Pierce. He has kind of this strong Jim Morrison style vocals, and it's just brought to the front. Just like Morrison would have. They do a CCR song called Run Through the Jungle, and it really runs through the gamut of from sexual nightmares shall we say, to voodoo rituals gone array. It's that kind of song. Throughout this album, this band is on fire, and most of the songs are like a mutant form of country music that met with post-punk, they met somehow in the desert, and they learned to get along with each other. That's what the album's kind of like. The song Brother and Sister, it just has this malicious guitar and bass groove. It just pounds you in the head. The guitars on this album, I mean, they are spot on, and every riff just seems to sink into your soul. The lead singer, Pierce, he just has this disturbed hoot and howl that just adds to the tension. This, Miami from the Gun Club, definitely a classic album, number 43. Number 42, Sugarcubes. This was an Icelandic alternative rock band that was formed in '86 and broke up in '91. Lead singer, Bjork. Obviously, she went on to a lot greater fame. They played post-punk, avant-punk, and rock, along with dream pop. Rolling Stones called them the coolest band in the world, and they came out of Iceland, so you know they had to be cool. Like the B-52s and the Talking Heads, they proved that post-punk could be playful and also serious. So in 1988, they released this album. This was their debut, and it was critically acclaimed. And I was reading my Rolling Stone and a few other magazines, and they just gushed over this, so I went out and I bought it. So it's called Life's Too Good, and it contained the hit Birthday. The music on this, it's whimsical, but yet you feel the lyrics are heartfelt. There's songs like Mama and another one called Deus, maybe saying that wrong. They have a real prominent bass, but then this jagged guitar lines that, to me, I think of Public Image Limited. Cold Sweat, I mean, that song has this broody, heavy funk kind of a song. And then there's Motorcrass, and that adds, they add horns to it and really give it a funky sound. So you can see these guys were doing a variety of different things on these albums. Bjork's vocals, what can you say? They weave around the different rhythms. They're squealing and moaning and yelping and just creating memorable effects like only Bjork could do. And then, of course, there's just the song Birthday. And on that, Bjork's keyboards and vocals complement a backdrop with a sound. When you listen to Birthday, the sound of it is like The Cure. This is indeed a very fun, quirky album. It comes in a variety of different colors, all pretty fluorescent, and I got the fluorescent orange. Number 42, Sugarcubes. Number 41, the Nomads. I know I've shown this group, I think a couple times probably this year, but they're left of the dial, right? It's a Swedish garage punk band that was formed in '81, and they are still playing. Their influences included, when you listen to probably the Stooges, Roky Erickson, Cramps, Ramones, New York Dolls. And in that time, these guys have put out 19 albums. So this is Outburst, and this was their third album, and it came out in 1984. You can still find it fairly inexpensive. 8 of the 12 songs on this are covers, from The King to Sleepy John Estes to Alex Chilton, to name a few. There's songs like, on here they do Wolfbane Blues, and it just, you can hear the Cramps influence on there, though they do it harder than the Cramps would. The Way You Touch My Hand, which is playing right now, I mean, it's just pure power pop. with jangly guitars and extremely tight harmonies. 5 years ahead of my time. That song, it brings in fuzzy psychedelic guitars and plenty of distortion is added to the guitar solo. Their lead singer, he really, when you listen to it, he doesn't have a really broad range, but he sings with passion and a lot of angst, shall we say. There is nothing earth-shattering on this album. You know, no, it's like, wow, an aha moment. This is just fun. Fun music, and you can hear them bring in a variety of their influences to create a very enjoyable listen. The Nomads, number 41. Okay, there we go. We did another 10, 40 more to go of the best, my favorite left of the dial bands from the 80s, or at least the ones I have vinyl of, shall we say. We're coming down to some of the big boys now, so be on the lookout. Appreciate you staying with me, watching this. I know they're a little bit longer, but there's just good music and stuff to explore, and a lot of it is really inexpensive and you can buy for under $10. Have yourself a great week. Cheers to all of you. Thanks for dropping by. Have a good night. Bye.